Hi everybody, my name is Emma and this is Emma Rose in Books, and today I am going to wrap up everything that I read in March. I read quite a few books, but I don't actually have them all because some of them were library books and things like that. So the first one that I read this month is one that I don't have. This was a book club read called Believe Me. I'll stick a photo up here. This is by JP Delaney. It's going to be interesting wrapping up these books as well because I've got building work going on at the moment and they're having their lunch break at the moment, so I'm trying to film this before they start making loads of noise again. But also they've broken my internet, so I can't look anything up. So if I can't remember things, well, you know, we'll see what I truly can remember of these books. And with Believe Me, no idea what the main character is called. I'll put it under here. I feel like it was Claire, but I'm not sure. Anyway, the main character, she's a female character. And she starts out, she's like being used as a honey trap by this sort of detective company for married men to show whether they're playing away from home. And she's an actress, she's going and studying acting at like a college or something like that during the day, and as the book unfolds you discover that she had some issues with her acting career that have made it difficult for her to work. So she goes to be used as bait for this particular man, whose name I also can't remember, and she meets his wife where she's sort of, you know, discovering how she's going to have to act and where she's got to meet him and all that kind of stuff. And then the wife is discovered dead, and that kind of catapults the plot. I actually really enjoyed Believe Me. I'm not a massive thriller fan. I read a few because I find them quite easy reads, and actually it's often a genre that we go to with my the book club that I'm in, which is like a group of mums, and we get together with all our kids and we get books and talk about the books, but actually not just the books, with friends as well, so it's just like a cool excuse to hang out, I guess. But I really enjoyed Believe Me because it was very twisty. So you'd think the plot was going one way and it would suddenly turn to another way. It really did lead you astray an awful lot. There were a few parts of it that seemed far-fetched, but actually with the way it's written, that didn't bother me. Particularly the end. I think you could think that it was unbelievable, I guess, but because of the way it had been written, I found it totally believable. I really enjoyed it. I don't know, if you're looking for kind of a relatively easy read thriller that keeps you guessing, then I think this is a really good one. I enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. It's probably more like a 3.5, but sort of 3.5 to 4 stars. It's good fun if you like that kind of genre. The next book that I read was this, The Writer's Journey by Christopher Vogler, probably. Now, my husband picked this up for me. Our library does like ex-library, they've got like a stand of ex-library books, and he always has a look to see if he thinks that there's anything that I might be interested in. He picked this up because with writing books he thought that it would be cool, and then he was really surprised that I actually read it. But why not? Why not read things about the craft? So this is a really interesting book and quite easy to read. It looks at mythic structure. So your standard kind of hero and villain and like mentor, like Star Wars is used a lot as an example. So Luke Skywalker meeting brain dead, the little dude, oh my god, Yoda. I don't know why that disappeared from my brain. And you know, going to fight the bad guy and all the stuff, and builds up kind of that story structure and why that's such a common story structure, and explains the ins and outs of it and how there can be variations. So how you could go for like an anti-hero or an anti-mentor, or how you can rearrange the steps of the story, or you can subvert them and things like that. Found it very interesting because I have no formal background in writing and I am working on a fiction project at the moment, and certain elements of this will be helpful. I don't want to follow like the exact format, but it still makes you think about what makes a successful story and why. The criticism I would give this book is that the examples it uses are from film, and you know, it's based on writing, it's for writers, but the examples are from film. And I mean, I guess in a way it's examples that everybody would be familiar with, but then if you're writing for writers, most writers would be well read, or at least there should be some books, but and I hadn't seen all of the films. It uses Star Wars, The Wizard of Oz, who else? Things like Robin Hood and Casablanca and The Matrix, and I don't know, it references loads and loads of different films, but there were a number that I hadn't seen, and although actually he does explain the plot points he's talking about, I found it's harder to relate. Like, he talks a lot about a film called Romancing the Stone that I haven't seen. He also talks about Greek mythology, which since I read Mythos, I have a vague idea of what he's talking about. So yeah, that would be my criticism, was I was like, well, where are the books then? Why is this all films? But it still is a very interesting idea of looking at story structure. So I did really like that, and I gave it 4 stars. The next book I read was The Breast Book by Emma Pickett. For anyone who doesn't know me or is new to this channel, I've written a book about breastfeeding, so this is very much within my area of interest, and I'm trying to read more non-fiction at the moment, so you'll see there are more non-fiction books at the moment. This book came out, I got it as I pre-ordered it and it came out this month, and Emma Pickett is the chair of a charity that I think an awful lot of, called the Association of Breastfeeding Mothers, and she is a lactation consultant, and so she's written this book. For a lot of the time I was reading this, I was thinking this is the book that I wish I'd have written. I'm an ex-teacher, so is Emma, and I felt very passionately when I was a teacher, I was a biology teacher, that I should be teaching about the biology of breasts, and I would mention it where it was appropriate. So if we were talking about antibodies, or if students asked, because sometimes they do, then I would talk about it, but I definitely felt it was a big hole in the curriculum that breasts aren't talked about. And for instance, when you learn about puberty, often for women that will centre on things like periods, but other than a mention of your breasts will grow, I don't think there's a real explanation of what's going on. And so as soon as I saw this was coming out, I was like, yes, I wish I'd have thought of this, was kind of my response. It's aimed at 9 to 14-year-olds. It says a puberty guide with a difference. It's the when, why and how of breasts. So it's solely about that. It does touch on other aspects of puberty because the sort of the relationship between them, but it focuses mainly on this. Now, because of Emma Pickett's background, she does talk a lot about breastfeeding and explain about milk production and how babies breastfeed and things like that, because it's kind of explaining the biology of what breasts are for. If your breasts are growing, then why? And I think that stylistically it's done very well. I think in terms of the way that the language she uses, the way it's pitched is excellent. I really, really enjoyed the chapter on mammogenesis, which is when your breasts grow, because actually, even though I know quite a lot about breastfeeding, I don't know a lot about about breasts developing. So I really liked that. She's also used photographs from the Feed Me campaign, which was a campaign to kind of publicise breastfeeding in public, so really lovely colour photos. And there is a note at the beginning of the book because, like I say, this is coming... Oh, and the illustrations are lovely as well. Really nice colour illustrations. The whole layout of the book is really beautiful. There is a message for parents and carers at the beginning to explain kind of where the book comes from, but also talking about breastfeeding, because for a lot of parents, I mean, breastfeeding is fairly uncommon, and Emma kind of acknowledges that and says, you know, you may feel uncomfortable with this being discussed in this book, and kind of puts it in context that it will be helpful for girls to learn about the biological function of their breasts, and even if they end up not breastfeeding, it still makes them kind of a more supportive member of society. So I think that's like really nicely situated. I wish that there was a part of this book about breast cancer in terms of talking about checking your breasts and breast health and things to look out for. I really would have loved to have seen that in here. But that aside, I really thought that this was a good book. I thought in terms of, for me, working with children of that age, looking at the language that she used, and I thought it was excellent. She also didn't shy away from scientific explanations of things and using science words, and I love that too, being an ex-biology teacher. I think if you have a daughter, or you maybe you have like a niece or a goddaughter or something like that who's approaching puberty. I mean, it would be a bit weird to like buy your goddaughter a book about breasts, but I think maybe highlight it if because it's a really good book, and maybe just, you know, let people know that it's available. I personally just thought that this covered a massive part of education about puberty, about reproduction, about like parenthood, that is completely missed out in the school curriculums. So, you know, if you agree to, then grab a copy. It's a really quick read, it's not massively long, and I don't know, I really liked it. And I gave that 5 stars, really enjoyed it. The next book that I read this month was Feminists Don't Wear Pink and Other Lies, which is curated by Scarlett Curtis. I've seen this going around BookTube and Bookstagram for a while. I mean, was it released last year? I think it was. It's a fairly new book. Yeah, 2018. I've wanted to read it for a little while, and I suggested it to the book group ladies, and our library only had 2 copies of this book, like in the area that they could order in. So we got 2 copies, and 2 of us read this book. I really, really enjoyed it. So it's a collection of essays from a variety of people. So to give you an idea, some of the really well-known ones who are in here: Gemma Arterton, Helen Fielding, Jamila Jamil, Jodie Whittaker, Keira Knightley, Saoirse Ronan, Zoe Sugg. Like, there's a real variety of women in here talking from very different perspectives, and I found some of them very powerful, some of them less so. In particular, I loved Keira Knightley's one, which is about motherhood, which obviously is like my thing. I found that very raw and emotional and beautifully written. I loved that one. Some of the ones about FGM, I think there's more than one, are fascinating. Looking at feminism from the point of view of like cultural differences, you know, and just looking at how people view it differently was fascinating. So yeah, I really, really enjoyed it. I actually didn't love the bits that were written by Scarlett Curtis, because she sort of made a foreword and there were little sections in there and then her own essay I didn't actually particularly love. And in particular, I really didn't like Zoella's essay in here. I subscribe to Zoe's channel. I find her interesting. I'm not her key audience. I'm a 34-year-old mother, you know, but I find it interesting to watch what she does, if that makes sense. And personally, I like her personality. I think she comes across as sort of a bubbly, kind-hearted woman, and I would have been really interested to know what she thought in here. And conversely, Tanya Burr's essay in here I really enjoyed, but if we're talking about YouTubers. But Zoe Sugg, she writes about business in here, and I kind of think I know what she was getting at, of the idea of she was a young woman when she started her YouTube channel, and having to kind of create a business around that. She's also a forerunner in an industry that people don't really understand. She's put on a stage, you know, in terms of her place as like a young woman who maybe could be treated with condescension, actually having to be a very shrewd businesswoman, and somebody who I'm sure has made excellent decisions and poor decisions along that way. What I wanted that essay to be was talking about kind of how feminism and how she feels as a woman within that environment. I would have loved that, and I think that's what she was trying to do, but actually it just ended up being an essay about what she's learned in business, and it didn't relate to feminism, and I felt like it stuck out as really the only essay that didn't really talk about feminism at all, other than introducing it saying, I'm a feminist. So that was a real shame, and wish that it had given what I wanted it to give, because I think that could have been a really powerful essay if it had been written that way. But oh, I tell you another one I really enjoyed was one by Kat Dennings, which goes through the paranoia as a mother, and all these different scenarios in which your child is going to be kidnapped, and like why you don't want your child to do anything, and it's quite funny. Yeah, there's loads of really good stuff in here. It's definitely worth a read, and I gave it 4 stars because some of the essays were incredible and some of them I found you know, okay, like I enjoyed them, but so that's why I gave it 4 stars. But then in a way it is the beauty of it, because I think anybody who reads this will identify with something in here. So yeah, that was how I felt about that one. Good book though, and I'm glad that it exists. Next I read A Court of Thorns and Roses. I've read a whole load of non-fiction stuff and I wanted to read some fiction. I picked this up in a charity shop. And I've seen it, people talking about it, obviously it's a super popular book, and I just wanted to give it a go. When I saw it I thought, oh, I'll grab that because I'm interested in what it's like, and I like fantasy as a genre. So if you don't know, I'm sure lots of you will have read this. This book is about a character called Feyre, and it's a retelling of Beauty and the Beast, and Feyre is she's sort of the, what's the word, like the breadwinner for her family. Her family have fallen on hard times. She's one of 3 daughters. Her mother is dead, and her father seems to have kind of gone into this like mode of, you know, can't function. She's a huntress, and she goes out and she kills this wolf that turns out to be a fae. And she then ends up entering a world of fairies and fae and kind of a fantasy world. I really liked that take on it, of the fact that the beast is not, you know, the traditional thing of the creature that's been turned by magic into a beast, that actually he is like a mythical creature. And her character is that she's very independent and she's sort of in charge of her family, she's very family oriented, and so that's quite interesting. But I really enjoyed it, I've got to say. I mean, I love fantasy books and it was a new world and I enjoyed it, I enjoyed the world building, but I had major issues with the relationship between Feyre and Tamlin, because, I mean, it's the same with Beauty and the Beast really, that you're looking at a captor essentially, and that relationship is uncomfortable. Particularly there's a reveal near the end, I don't want to give spoilers, of why Tamlin had captured her, and as soon as she found that out, like if I'd have been Feyre, I would have dropped everything with Tamlin, because it was, you know, it made it all too seedy and weird and like engineered. So yeah, that whole relationship. But then I suppose it would be difficult to do a Beauty and the Beast retelling without that kind of a relationship. But no, I mean, yeah, Feyre should have answered a lot more questions. She's also a little bit all over the place in terms of her character. I feel like her voice changes during it. She acts in different ways, but still, it was a good book. When I put it on Instagram, lots of people said that the second one is a lot better, so I will still read it, and you know, as I say, it's a genre that I enjoy, and I didn't hate it, but I just thought that bit was implausible. The whole part at the end with the challenges I thought was cool, because obviously that was a whole new thing. I love that, the newness, the creation, that side of things was really, really cool, but yeah. Anyway, I gave that 3 stars. I did enjoy it, but yeah. And then the last book that I read, I can't find, and I took an Instagram picture of it like 2 days ago, and I don't know what I've done with it. So when I find it, I might film some little sections or put a photo or something up there, but it's somewhere in this room, but who can say where? This was, a friend of mine lent me this. This was Understanding the Highly Sensitive Child. I cannot remember who it's by. I think it's William James, but I might be making that up. If that's wrong, I'll put a thing down here. And this book is looking at children who, so sensitive as in feeling things, as in if you think about the senses, they experience senses very strongly. And looking at, and it looks at the different ways that can manifest itself. So for some children, they might be very, very withdrawn because of the amount that they're experiencing. Other children get very overwhelmed and very cross, or they act out, or they get very hyper. But essentially kind of it just looks at examples of the different types of highly sensitive children. Now, I personally believe that I'm highly sensitive. I notice things that I find that nobody else has noticed. I'm particularly attuned to people's sort of tone of voice and expression, and I worry that I've like said something wrong or offended somebody, or that, oh, but then they acted like this, and I'll really like nitpick at people's reactions about things. I also, I get very overwhelmed by things. I find, sorry if you can hear the builders outside, I find that like if a day is really beautiful, I'm really, really overwhelmed by it. I find I struggle when things are untidy. It's not to say my house is always tidy, it's not a complete wreck, but, or like disorganised, or, you know, I'm just very, very attuned to like my environment and whether my environment is pleasant. And I find like my husband, who's not like that at all, he's just completely insensitive to it. So whereas like a little bit of paint that's come off will drive me crazy, he will not even notice that it's there. So, and sometimes that kind of sense of overwhelm with me can be that I do withdraw, I don't really want to talk to anyone, I want to spend time alone, and I do really like my own company. Or it can be that I get crazy angry because it all just gets too much and I completely lose my temper. But yeah, I can identify with that. And two of my children, I would say I've got 3 kids, and 2 of my children I think have that tendency. Sorry, builders. The trouble with this book is it is so short. I read this in 15 minutes and I wanted so much more from it. I wanted to, maybe not, I mean the title is correct, it's Understanding the Highly Sensitive Child. If you're a parent that has a highly sensitive child and you're not sensitive, you're going to really struggle with that. And I think my husband struggles with us sometimes because he's just like, why are you guys so emotional? And so it doesn't, it stays within the scope of its title, but I think you can't say, oh, this is what high sensitivity is, and then not say, but if that's what you experience, here's where to go next. Here's where you might get support, or here are some good books. It suggests one person who's worked in that field, but you know, you try this, try that, and here's the difficulties you might experience, and because it's looking at a parent-child relationship, you know, as a parent, how do you deal with that? How do you deal with that if you're also highly sensitive? And you tend to kind of clash. I think I find that with my son and my daughter, of just like there's just too much going on. Or if you're not sensitive and you don't have the empathy of that, like how can you deal with that? What more can you do? It didn't have any of that. This book is just way too short. It's something like, I think it's £4, £5, something like that to buy, which isn't expensive, but if I spend £4 or £5 on a book, I mean, I've bought books for that price that are full length. You know, you can get like your cheap novels, and I needed, I mean, I didn't buy it, somebody lent it to me, but it needed more. Perhaps if it was like a 99p book or something like that, then you'd shrug your shoulders and say, oh well, because what was in there was so well written and really interesting, and I did learn from it, but there just wasn't enough. I mean, a 15-minute, that's like a pamphlet, you know, or a magazine. That's not a book. It just, yeah. So for that reason, I gave it 2 stars, but it really doesn't reflect the way that it's written. It is written well. That's everything that I read, and as you can hear, the builders are back from their lunch, and they're going to be making loads of noise. So I hope that you enjoyed that. It was quite a varied bunch of things that I read this month, and I still don't really know what my TBR is for next month, so there we go. Please like if you did. Let me know if you've read any of these books, or you have any recommendations. Why can't I say that word? And if you have any recommendations for me based on the things that I've said that I've read. I'd love to talk to you in the comments, so please do have a chat with me there. Please like if you did, and please subscribe for more videos on writing and reading. Follow me on my other social media stuff, it's all below, and I will see you all for my next one. Bye!